Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's session. On digital system navigation and conservation. This series is brought to you by ShareScreen Africa. My name is Diane Mumararungu. I'm based in Rwanda and I'm part of ShareScreen Africa team. And in the room, I have a co-host, Dr. Stella Malanga. She's going to be my co-host during this session. Today's topic is conservation technology, a case study of how we make tech work in a protected area. And our guest speaker today is going to be Mr. Craig Thomas. If I can tell you a little bit about Mr. Craig Thomas, he's conservation manager at African Parks Majiti Wildlife Reserve in southern Malawi. Craig leads conservation effort across over 700 square kilometers of protected land, managing species like elephant, rhinos, lions, cheetahs, wild dogs, and giraffe, and many more, I believe so. He brings a wealth of experience in combining traditional conservation method with modern technology, using the tools like Earth Ranger, which is one of the tools that he's going to show us how it works, and also GPS collars and remote sensing to make informed data-driven decisions. And what is mostly truly inspiring about Craig is his commitment not just to technology, but to people, engaging communities and mentoring the next generation of conservation leaders. And I want to take a pause and appreciate him for making today to give us this talk, and we are very expectant to receive the wisdom and knowledge and experience from him. Before I welcome him, I'm going to first read the key learning outcomes that we are going to look at after this session. Tech only works when people do. Technology succeeds only with dedicated people behind it. Monitoring drives every management decision. Smart management starts with solid monitoring. Each species needs a different approach. Every species requires its own strategy. The more connected we are, the smarter we manage. Integrated data makes for smarter conservation. And lastly, adapt, test, improve, and always try again. Keep learning, refining, and moving forward. And that's what we look at with technology.
Thank you so much. Let me try and share my screen. Hopefully I don't mess that up. Okay, so I am quite a fast talker. I hope that's not a problem. If it is, please slow me down. I get carried away. I get like, yeah, to be honest, I get nervous. I don't know. It's not easy speaking for people all the time. So yeah, it is what it is. I'm going to be talking about conservation technology, and I'm going to look specifically at Majeti Wildlife Reserve. Yeah, my name's Craig. As everyone said, I'm a conservation manager here in Majeti. And I don't know what else there is to give you as context. I think probably the biggest piece of context and something to keep in mind as we go through this presentation is the fact that I am not of a tech background. I am not trained in technology. I've done a couple of short courses to try and help boost my knowledge, but it's not my specialization or my field of knowledge. So my field of knowledge, I studied nature conservation. I come very much from a animal enthusiast kind of perspective, but I think many of us in the younger generation are very tech inclined. We understand the use of technology. Everyone's got a smartphone. We know how that kind of like Internet of Things works. And I guess it's come a lot more naturally to us to integrate these kinds of things into our daily workflow. So yeah, we're going to look at Majeti. I'll take you guys through a quick briefing on, what it is that we actually focus on in the park. How we set up our monitoring systems. I'm going to skip over some of the more specific stuff that, is very like Majeti specific. And I kind of mixed and matched presentations that I've got available and I put this together. So please excuse me if I fly past stuff. It's probably not relevant, but you can always ask about it at a later stage. And I'm more than happy to come back to it when things are wrapped up. So you guys should be seeing operations. So another thing just to discuss is that the conservation department in our park focuses on a number of different operations. So we do the wildlife monitoring side of things, which is obviously your daily like species monitoring sort of stuff. You do your interventions. wildlife capture, darting and immobilization, translocations, that sort of stuff. We have a big volunteer program that we run. It's a good way to generate income in a protected area, is to allow volunteers to join a department like this, specifically because we're often up to a lot of really interesting activities and the volunteers get to see that firsthand. So yeah, super cool. Super way like to integrate people into conservation and, allow people to understand what we get up to. We've obviously got waterhole management, obviously a key thing in a protected area, specifically an area in the context of Mjeti. That's actually something I haven't really got in here, is the context of Mjeti. It's a 700 square kilometer park. About half of it is Miombo woodland, and then the other half is like a mixed woodland savanna landscape. So we've only got two like permanent sources of large water. It's the Shire River, which comes out of Lake Malawi, and then we've got the Mkhulumadzi River, which joins the Shire River. Yeah, I'll show you an Earth Ranger later. And then we've got fire management. Obviously, fire is also a key role in, systems. I'm not going to go too much into that. I'm sure you guys know this stuff already. And then, of course, alien plant removal. Not such a big issue, strangely enough. We don't have that much, alien plant, entering into the reserve, but we are starting to see it along the river, I suppose, with human disturbance upstream, allowing seeds to flow downstream. It is beginning to impact us. Just as a bit of an introduction, so tech is obviously becoming, more and more a part of our lives, but it's also an extremely powerful tool and something we look to leverage as much as we can in Mjeti. Yeah, we're trying to use it for animal tracking mostly in my department, as was alluded to with the Mentos or whatever the question thing was. There's obviously like fence monitoring, weather data, all that stuff that you can get on it. But as I will emphasize quite a bit, nothing is as good as the people that implement these things. So when it comes to all of this stuff, you have to have passionate people on the ground. It takes commitment. It's not something anyone can ever escape from. Protected areas require passionate people, and it'll always be like that. And then obviously boots on the ground. Once again, that's just a shout out to Rangers. Rangers are obviously the backbone of our reserve, and nothing we do would be impactful without them. So why do we monitor in Mjeti? So obviously it's about evaluating your protected area and then understanding, what sort of monitoring you want to do at what scale. So the size of your protected area would make a big difference. A small area needs intensive monitoring because your impacts from animals can be much more severe in a small area. An area the size of the Serengeti, or, Chinko in the Central African Republic, or Boma and Badangilo in South Sudan. These are areas the size of countries. They have natural processes that cause balance and make it a very changing landscape all the time. But places like Mjeti, where imbalances can occur quite quickly, especially by keystone species, predators like lion can often be very impactful in quite a short space of time, with the right conditions. And then, basically we monitor to try and detect those changes. And unfortunately, we have to be pretty stringent on our intervention measures at times in order to reduce the impact of specific species, in order to kind of have a balancing sort of cohesion in the reserve. Yeah. Within the monitoring stuff that we do, you've obviously got a couple of priority species broken down into 3 predators and 3 herbivores. This isn't to say every park needs to monitor these 6 species. It's what we found in Mjeti. We wanted to prioritize. We reintroduced a couple of those species. To clarify, we reintroduced all of them. Mjeti had no animals except for kudu left, and we had to reintroduce all large, sort of carnivores and herbivores, aside from your small things. So yeah, lion is obviously a absolute, I will get to it just now. You will learn a lot about lion management as you progress through your careers, or I guess some of you already have. Wild dog management is obviously another thing that we focus on, monitoring the changes in our population, that sort of thing. Yeah, cheetah reintroduced in 2021. I'm sure you guys will know about post-release monitoring and the fact that after releasing any sort of animal into your landscape, you have to monitor what they do. You have to understand how they succeed or don't succeed, and what sort of impacts they have on your landscape. Elephant also impact the landscape hugely. Rhino monitoring, obviously for the safety of the rhinos mostly. Understanding demographics is also important. And then giraffe, because we reintroduced them in 2018, we obviously wanted to detect that the giraffes are growing in population. They are the only viable population of giraffes in the country. So it's kind of cool that we've got that in Mjeti. Additional monitoring that we do, So we monitor pangolins through, tagging them on the back. We obviously follow up with carcasses using GPS clusters and that sort of thing that we gain from lion data. Predation events are reported on Earth Ranger. This all, like you guys might be wondering, this it's not really a tech outcome, but all of these things are monitored using technology in some way or another. The lion, wild dog, cheetah, elephant, rhino, they're all monitored using some sort of collar or sensor. And then cameras take photos of them, camera traps capture them. So it all ties back together. Yeah, there's nothing else. Oh, and then the weather detection is obviously extremely important. Having like reliable weather detecting or weather sensors that you can record your weather data on is obviously extremely important. And then, yeah, we use the aerial census every 2 years to detect, changes in our herbivore guilds as well as camera trapping. Keystone species, so lions obviously one of them, reintroduced into Mejeti in 2012. Initially, that reintroduction was only 3 individuals. We boosted the population a bit in 2018 with a couple more females just to provide some genetic diversity, and a couple of males actually. And by 2025, the population is 77 lions, and that is with an extremely intensive contraception program. So a total of 7 lions introduced, and in just over 10 years, you got to 77. That's why, lion management and monitoring is so important, because these populations can rapidly grow to a point that they do quite heavily affect your herbivores. Yeah, so we do call-ups on a regular basis. We have like a Fox Pro, which is like a speaker specifically designed for this sort of thing. It plays like a buffalo call. We get the lions to come in, and that obviously attracts them. They then eat a carcass, and we dart them, put a collar on them, and we are able to monitor their movements at a later stage. Wild dogs, also a priority species, reintroduced in 2021. Monitoring post-release and then monitoring the change in wild dog demographics in a park is obviously extremely important. They're another species that, when successful, can really, really thrive, and yeah, obviously have done so in Mejeti. Just to give some background, Mejeti has really low poaching rates, so we don't really see much impact from human presence outside the park. And as a result, you've got a lot of like success amongst our herbivores and our carnivores as a result of that. So yeah, very little natural deaths in a population like this, because your lions all know each other, so you don't get much like natural infighting and like many natural processes taking place. I can touch on that at a later stage if you're more curious. Wild dog management, we obviously give rabies vaccinations, and then we capture and translocate dogs as we need to. We have considered contracepting our wild dogs, and we probably will have to do that at some point, because the number of protected areas that can take animals like this is obviously limited. They need big expanses of land to move in. They are quite a large human wildlife conflict risk, but we do monitor both of the packs that we have with collars. We've got a cheetah population too, obviously quite a low population. We monitor them mostly with camera traps. There's nothing else really of like massive informational knowledge that you guys are going to gain from that. Giraffe monitoring is pretty cool. We use a AI software called Giraffe Spotter. It's not mentioned here, but we upload our photos into that, and Giraffe Spotter has a full catalog of Mejeti's giraffes and identifies them for us. People who visit the reserve can do the same thing. So they upload it into this Giraffe Spotter AI, and it detects them. I think it's got great benefit. It's ruined some of the volunteer jobs, because the volunteers used to love like identifying giraffes, but yeah, we track all of our giraffes down to an individual level. So it's pretty cool. It's really, really cool tech. It is available for carnivores. I believe it's called Carnivore Book, or what, it's something like that, made by a group called Wild Labs. It's really, really good stuff. And they do have some impressive technology if you do want to look it up. We don't use it just because we just use the volunteers to identify them. We also don't have a big enough landscape that we can justify that sort of effort, because it is quite a lot of effort to upload all these photos, keep records of these spreadsheets that you need to. So for giraffes, we found it pretty easy. For other species, we just thought it wouldn't be worth it. Elephants is another one that we monitor. It would be lovely to have elephants monitored through AI. I don't think it's far off. From the way AI is progressing, and the capabilities of it. It's probably already able to. We just haven't found a platform that we are able to store all of our individual elephants on and have the AI look at it and tell us about them. How you identify elephants is you use their ears and the different patterns of veins, and then different breaks like nicks, tears, and cuts on their ears to identify the elephants. Like elephants have an individual one. It generally becomes easier as the elephants are older. Calves and stuff like that will obviously have less breaks in their ears because they just haven't been through as much experience in life. But yeah, over time you can identify them all. Yeah, we maintain a photographic database by doing exactly that. We often get elephants walking up to us. We capture both sides. Nothing really relevant here. I'm honestly, I'm just going to try and not bore you guys with this sort of detail because there's quite a bit to get through. The rhino monitoring is probably one of the cooler aspects. So this has a lot of tech incorporated into it. A lot of our rhinos have horn implants. So they'll sit on the front horn, or if your rhino has a big enough horn, it can fit in the back horn. We've also now started implementing foot collars. I don't have any photos. We put them on in the last couple of weeks and they've been really, really good. But foot collars, obviously, you have to evaluate on a reserve by reserve basis. Certain mud just doesn't work with foot collars. It'll damage the rhino's, feet, and I wouldn't recommend it for all protected areas. Yeah, we've currently got 33 rhinos. We're not shy to say it. It's all black rhino. There's no white rhino population in Malawi. They didn't occur here historically. And we're having this weird problem with our rhinos where the ears are basically like collapsing and degrading. And you can see this female's actually lost her other ear. We don't find that any of our rhinos have died from it. It does get pretty like sore, and you can see they are being impacted. We are looking at, the reason for this. But yeah, it takes some wise students and we could probably figure it out. We've got a rhino tracking team. So this is the dedicated team of rhino monitors. These guys go out every day. They either use like a telemetry set with a VHF monitor, or they've just literally follow the spoor of the rhino and then they get to them. They carry cameras with them. They take photos of the rhinos. We identify the rhinos based on either ear notching, but not so much ear notching anymore because of that like ear degradation problem. It's more about how the ear is degraded that we actually identify our rhinos. As like regards to rhino management in Majetti, we actually tried a certain brand. I won't say their name just to not discredit them, but their horn implants tried and we failed heavily with them. The more recent batch that we got from a different company is working really, really well. We make use of a system called LoRaWAN. So it was in the question earlier. It stands for Long Range Wide Area Network. It's a series of towers that we've got in the park. So Majetti has 5 of them. I'll cover it a bit more later on. But just in case I say that word and you don't quite understand, it basically means that you've got collars in the park that transmit to this tower, and this tower uses this tower basically records all your data and sends it back to us here, where we get like the spatial information on our animals. Pangolin work is something really unique to Majetti. We get a lot of pangolins. We've had about 60 in the last 4 years. Trafficking is quite high around us, but also a lot of goodwill, or thought of goodwill, if that makes sense. It's not necessarily that you want every animal to be handed in, but unfortunately, with the amount of natural habitat destruction happening around the reserve, we're finding it more and more prevalent that pangolins are being picked up because there's just not that much place for them to hide anymore. They're being seen a lot more often, but they're also being picked up and brought to us. There's a misconception that they only belong in protected areas, and we're trying to change that mindset, but it's also difficult when you get someone at your park gate bringing you a pangolin to say, no, take that pangolin back. You've got no guarantees that that pangolin will indeed go back, and it's not the responsible thing to do. So we do take them in. We fit them with VHF or LoRa tags, just to have really good tracking capability. So you got your spatial layers from Earth Ranger, and then you're able to track them on foot and go and find exactly where they are. We focus mostly on your post-monitoring efforts. So 2 or 3 months after releasing the pangolins, we follow them, and then we take the tag off. So it's not like we obviously are invading their space for a period. But if you ask me, the worst thing you could do is release these animals and, they were consistently dying after 2 months or 2 weeks, and you didn't know this because you just didn't monitor them. So it's about evaluating those risks versus the benefits. And, through doing that, you basically have a better understanding of, their survival rates. We find it's pretty high. They're pretty hardy animals. Unfortunately, some of the more severe incidents of trafficking where pangolins get kept in bags for a long time and they get pneumonia or stomach ulcers, they often don't make it. They're just too stressed, they're too dehydrated, they're too hungry, and it's very difficult to get them to eat. They very often die. Vultures, obviously an extremely important species across the continent. We help Endangered Wildlife Trust with this. We send all of our data to them. We've got a couple of tagged vultures that come through Majetti every now and then. We take photos of the tags. They've got a little number on them that kind of identifies that individual. We'll tell you where the individual was tagged, etc., etc. And yeah, we get a number of different types in Majetti, which is obviously really cool. So what does Majetti use for tech? Camera traps, obviously extremely important. I think I've got a slide. I'm going to come back to that stuff. But basically, these camera traps here are really cool. If you guys ever get an opportunity to do camera trapping work or you need camera traps, I would suggest these. I've got no affiliation to them whatsoever. However, they're really cool because they've got a solar panel on top. They don't ever go flat, and you don't need to buy batteries for them. So the sun literally charges them up. And in contexts like Malawi, where the sun is out for like 85% of the year, we've got we'll get to a camera trap after 6 weeks and it's still on 100% battery and not showing any signs of dropping. So this one's called Solar 4K or something. It doesn't really have a specific brand, but yeah, we put them alongside roads, next to water holes, just in random spots. Sometimes you'll find a spring and you really just want to see what's going on there. So you put it there. We record our data, we capture it all on spreadsheets, and it feeds to us basically abundance and that sort of thing across the park. Just to go back and talk about some other stuff. So we obviously have a lot of collars, tags, and implants that we put on our animals. I'm not going to show you guys photos of that sort of stuff. I would rather just show you the Earth Ranger screen in a couple of moments. That will give you a bigger picture of where these these items feed into and what sort of systems they go into. As I spoke about earlier, LoRaWAN, so it's those towers. Earth Ranger is the software that we use. It's basically a big map of Majetti that is super interactive. So you got your fence line on the outside. It tells you about your fence line. You've got a whole bunch of data that is recording. You can do all sorts of reports. It's called situational awareness platform, basically. I'm not going to elaborate on it too much. I think it's better just to show people that sort of stuff. We make use of these Ranger Edge trackers. So they're basically little handheld devices that you just put in your chest webbing or in a backpack, and tracks all of our rangers' movements. They're not supposed to be used as personnel safety devices. So you're not supposed to use it in life or death situations, but for understanding where rangers are moving, where they're sighting animals, that sort of thing, they obviously are really, really useful. And that's the sort of use case we make do with. We've got a weather station here. Handheld radios are obviously extremely important because you don't have cell phone reception through most of the park. Being able to communicate throughout the park. We've got a big repeater on the main tower, on the main hill in the park. And then, that pretty much gives us, I think it's 95% coverage. GPS devices, obviously a staple, very long battery life, allow you to know where you are at all times. Smartphones becoming more and more common. Now most of our ranger teams go out with a smartphone. They're able to log their own reports, that sort of thing. So yeah, really cool tech. You got satellite imagery and Google Earth Engine. I put that at the bottom. It's not exclusive to Majetti, but oh my gosh, if you're not using this kind of thing now, especially with the rise of AI, you're honestly going to get left behind. I have no idea how to code. I don't have an absolute inkling of idea, but I had an idea that I wanted to basically see Majetti's fire history. I just wanted to see what happened in the last 5 years to inform our management plan. And I literally went onto ChatGPT and I just asked it, how can I make a map of our fire history in Majetti? I'm not even kidding. At the end of the day, I had the map, and it's that simple. You can literally just talk to it about ideas that you have, and you can do these sorts of things. And that's where the power in this stuff lies. I'm sure I'm probably talking to the converted here. You guys probably know these sorts of things, but we're now looking at using it to mark areas of greenness, like using NDVI, to basically understand where our elephants are moving in the wet and dry season, which is just super cool. So the potential's there, and it's open source and it's for everyone to use. So yeah, I can't recommend it enough. Camera traps, as I spoke about, the collars, the tags, and the implants. I spoke about most of this, so I'm not really going to hang on it too much. VHF only. So some of them are basically, you don't get any satellite imagery or any sort of knowledge of where they are on your map. You just have to go out into the bush or ideally fly with an airplane. scan with the VHF receiver, get an idea of where the animal is using the plane's VHF scanning, and then you know you've got a rough idea of where you need to go. Then you just drive to that location and you get it. But that obviously requires a pilot. I'm pretty sure in a couple of years, and there was a company that did this, but they went bankrupt with the USAID funding. They were called like WildNet drones or something like that. But basically, they had a drone that you could fly up with a telemetry scanner, and it could scan where all your collared animals were, and it would come back to you, and it would give you this map. Yeah, I can't wait for the day that sort of thing becomes commercially available, because you won't even need a pilot in your park then. You can literally just send a drone up. Battery life on VHF is amazing. So you could probably monitor all your rhinos for a good couple of years, with just a drone. You don't need anyone flying in the air, nothing like that, which is super exciting to think about. Something that I've observed that I don't know what your guys are like feeling on it is, but I find that generally conservation lags behind when it comes to tech. And it's no fault of people in conservation. It's the fault, not even the fault of, but it's a result of money going to other departments and sectors first. So where the money is, you're more likely to get that sort of, investment into these sorts of things. So yeah, one day it'll get to, conservation, and we will have some really cool stuff. Yeah, not going to go in any of these. Tags and implants, yeah, still going on that, nothing there. The lion carcass cluster follows is a pretty cool one. So basically what we use in the reserve is we found that we had a knowledge gap where we didn't really know what our lions were consuming. So we went and looked at where they were sleeping in the day or where a bunch of points were. And we determined that where there's more than 5 points in consecutive sort of close proximity, it's very likely that those lions were there for a long time for two reasons. It's either that they were sleeping or that they had food there and they stayed there because they were eating, and then they were resting and eating some more. So every week on a Monday, we go through the previous week's data. We look at where all the points are for the lions across the collared lions across the park. And using that, we can discern, a couple of clusters that we then send field teams out into. They walk to those points, look around. Very often you'll find vultures there. And yeah, you can pretty much see what our lions have been eating. So using that, we were able to determine what our lion prey preference was in the park. And interestingly, that then was correlated with our aerial sensors. And we found that there was a very strong correlation between what lions were eating and what animal populations were declining. And then obviously you've got a good basis to make management decisions off of using that sort of, double data sets and that sort of thing. I actually think, yes, I did put it in. So here's that map that I made of the the satellite imagery. It's not very precise, don't get me wrong. I'm not claiming that it's the world's best map, but it gives you the past five years worth of data. You can see that the red year was 2020. That obviously burnt a lot of the park. And we now know that, the last 5 years of history would lead to this and this decision be made. We obviously then decided, well, this hasn't been burnt in 5 years. This is a pretty good block to burn. We burnt that for ecological reasons. We realized also that there was a weakness in the park. If this much of the park was burning per year or in a year, there was probably something wrong with our fire management strategy. So we went back to the drawing board using technology, looked at things and decided that the best way to do it would be to put fire breaks along this perimeter. And then on these roads here, it made a world of difference. We haven't had a fire there since, as you can see on the map. And yeah, it's helped us a lot. Situational awareness, Earth Ranger. Sorry, the one on the right looks like an absolute mess, but I did that intentionally. So what I did was I just clicked uncluster on 3 months worth of reports. And normally it like automatically puts all the reports together and makes it super neat. This just shows you the pure volume of reports that we're dealing with over a 3-month period. This will consist of carcass reports, animal reports. A lot of them will be fence line reports. There's a big gap there. I'm actually quite embarrassed about that. It's just a lack of monitoring data in that area. But yeah, there is a big hill there. So it wouldn't really, we don't think that we're missing out on too much information, with that hill being there. Yeah, what sort of things does it give us? Well, we can track animal movements all in one place. So you don't have to go into individual websites anymore and look at, our collars for this animal are here. It's all in one place. This pangolin moved a long distance. Pretty interesting to see. So this was just after release. Very typical of a pangolin that doesn't have a home range yet. They sort of just bomb in a random direction and they just keep going. She's now settled, and you'll see when I show you guys on the next couple of minutes that you can sort of start discerning when they've settled, they start finding a home range, that sort of thing. Those lion GPS clusters that I was telling you about. So if you had to look at this and you think, okay, well, that lion's probably resting, you zoom in a little bit more. This is actually two photos. It just looks like it's merged. You can see that that lion was there for a good couple of hours, probably more than 2 days. So we sent a team to investigate that, and we did. We actually found a sable carcass there. So yeah, that's pretty much, how you can utilize this sort of thing. I'm also like, I'm very much on the surface level of this stuff. There's obviously people that do a lot fancier work. But what I think is beneficial about this is it's very easy to comprehend. I'm not doing fancy science. I'm looking at pictures and going, oh, let's go and see what's going on there. So it translates nicely. You know what I mean? It's like anyone that's managing a reserve can do these sorts of things. And I often think, that's where the benefit, that's where the beauty in conservation tech is where when it's accessible to anyone. You obviously have to go through a lot of effort. You have to put a lot of collars on, that sort of thing. So we've spent many hours collaring animals. We had like over 40 lions collared at a stage, or over 30 lions collared at a stage. So yeah, things have been pretty hectic. We'll visit Earth Ranger just now and explore it together. That's pretty much the end of my like presenting. I can't speak English. So yeah, there's a pangolin in a box. That's a rhino horn implant after it was just put on. There's some rhino trackers standing with a rhino that we saw. The rhino didn't even know that we were there. So it was a really, really special sighting. Just some more photos of the work. There they are giving the reversal to a rhino after putting a horn implant on. Yeah, there's just a photo of the rangers that helped us find this rhino, preparing for a lion call up. Elephant, that's a VHF receiver. I'm sure you guys all know what that looks like. That's what an elephant collar being put on looks like from the ground. This is a pangolin in treatment. So there's obviously a lot of stuff that gets used for pangolin also. It's got like a pulse oximeter, to sort of measure blood oxygen, that sort of thing. Yeah, lion collar being put on, and a camera trap at a wild dog den to record our pups. So we like to just see the pups from as young as possible, understand if you lose a couple as they go, what are your sort of survival rates in Majeti. So far, it's a very high survival rate. We've had 26 dogs born in Majeti since 2021, and of those 26, I think 24 have survived. So it's extremely high survival rates, which means extremely high growth rates. Yeah, a wild dog lion collaring there, and then that's what a rhino horn implant looks like, as it's just before you put epoxy all over it. So it's pretty cool. And that's the end of it. You guys should see an Earth Ranger. So there's going to be a bunch of reports, and it's going to look like a lot of data. That's because I filtered it and I went with the last 3 months of data. So it doesn't normally look like this. You can adjust it as you want, to reflect what you want to see and what you don't want to see. Some of the more basic layout of this. So this is what Majeti looks like. If I had to remove all the reports, it's probably going to be quite a mission. I think I can. Yeah, I can't. I'm not going to take it off just because it's going to make. Okay, there I took it off. But that's what Majeti looks like. So you got a buffer zone between the park and the. Sorry if I'm looking off this way. It's just because the screen's this way. So there's a buffer zone between the park and the fence line. You've then got what's known as a geofence. So this is the pangolin geofence. I think the other one is like the wild dog geofence or something. No, they're both pangolin, but they work for all of our animals. So anytime an animal gets close to the fence, we just like, or a collared animal gets close to the fence, we like to know, partly because it's a human wildlife conflict risk for certain species, and other times it's for the safety of that animal. So when a pangolin gets close, often pangolins get electrocuted in fence lines. So you want to know those sorts of things. I want to quickly have a look here. I think there's a geofence alert somewhere, probably going to be quite far back. So I'm just going to skip on it for now. But yeah, you can sort of see all of our reporting structures. So people record lions reports. They can say, oh, there was 4 male lions here. You can sort of understand what's going on there. Where that lion report is, what you will, this is such a mess because there's so many reports, but you can see that there's collared lions there also where the report was done. So you know that the lions are there, they were there an hour ago, and you can obviously follow as you need to. We also report our wildlife interventions. So we say lion immobilized, what do we do? We did a vasectomy, and then just identify the individual. We report elephants, obviously, just to understand what the sort of movements are. You can see that there's a lot of elephant, giraffe, and lion reports here. And, without even knowing any context to Majeti, if you had to switch on the satellite map and load that in, I hope it doesn't take too long, and you were to zoom in, there's a water hole just here. So suddenly it makes sense why there's such a high density of animals around. It's just because there's so much water. yeah, other than that, you've obviously got your lion collars. That sort of, it shows you the movements once again. I think this is actually the exact example I used earlier, but you can see a very clear cluster there on this female. We do that for all the collars every week, and then you get a pretty good picture of where your animals are moving. This pangolin's settled now nicely in the range. It's actually not going to load fast, so I'm just going to go to Chimwala. This pangolin's got a pretty interesting story. She was handed into us and settled, or we thought she settled in the last 21 days in a certain area. So, she kind of stayed here for a while. And I hope it's not too unclear for you guys what I'm doing. Let me try and hide the events just to make things a bit clearer. But yeah, so we thought she settled in a home range, and then she just decided to bomb all the way up. And she actually went outside the park. She crossed through the fence, which is pretty impressive, probably just dug under. And then, went up onto this hill here, and then just decided she's going to come back and she's going to stay inside the park. So yeah, it's just interesting how they sort of have these habits that they choose to just move from and to. You've obviously got your ranger trackers here also. So I'm not going to load that just because I know it's like literally thousands of data points for the ranger trackers. Because they're rechargeable, you can just put it on like 2-minute intervals. But that'll crash Earth Ranger. So I don't feel like doing that right now. We've got a little map of where all the LoRa towers are in the park, and then their status, just so that we know they're always active. So you can see them dotted around all the bigger hills on these contours here. We've obviously got the wild dog collars, just telling us about the dogs. You guys will notice that the dogs tend to move around the fence line. We suspect that's just because of hunting habits. They like to hunt along the fence. This pack here does pretty much the same thing. They're more central, these dogs. But in general, we find they stick along the fence lines a lot of the time. So they'll go down there, they'll hunt the fence line, and then, cross through and around. Yeah, and then I think I've got a couple more things. This is the lion. I wanted to show you this pangolin that bombed like that. And then lastly, I wanted to quickly show you a vulture cluster, or a vulture, like the vulture points. So let me just hide the events just because it's such a mess. Okay, so if I had to show you this vulture, she's over here. She was feeding on a carcass right next to the road. So we found that carcass. The vultures also do a similar thing to lions, where you get information based on where they are. However, what's interesting about vultures, because they can fly, they can tell you a lot about your landscape as a whole. So not just in Majeti, but Malawi as a whole, or the region as a whole. So we looked at this data and we saw that this vulture obviously eats a lot in the park, but every now and then she leaves the park. This case was probably she not going too far. It actually looks like she overshot her when she came in. But what we do notice is that when she leaves the park, she goes to a very specific location. So if I was to move us out, you can see that she flies up to the only other protected area in the region, or the only other like intact protected area. There's a couple of other parks, but they don't have predators, so they don't have a fully functional ecosystem, and therefore vultures aren't as necessary, as in Majeti, and this park is Liwonde. So you can see how the vultures know very well where the intact protected areas are and that they move between them. Yeah, just a pretty interesting way to use data like this on a larger level, and how conservation technology has basically, can tell us a lot about intact protected areas. I believe if I had to zoom right out, I spent a lot of time on this, but there's another vulture in Nyasa here. So this one also flies from, there it is. So it flies all the way from Nyasa National Park, which I believe, yeah, not too far from Tanzania, but it flies all the way from there down to Liwonde every now and then flies back. So they know where the protected areas are, and they definitely do find them, and I find that pretty cool. Yeah, that's about all that I've got to show you. It was a very short presentation, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you so much, Craig. This was really a very insightful and interesting presentation. I want to take this moment to appreciate you.
No
And
problem.
yes, and the audience is agreeing with me. I can see a round of applause going up for you. And I want to let us move quickly into the Q&A session. There are a couple of questions. I know we had the first question from Salim. He was asking if there is a specific why there is no white rhinos in Majid Park. Was saying, did you try to introduce them? sort of story. He wanted to know why you don't have white rhinos.
Yeah, that's more a question of like bringing back historically occurring species. So like Majeti never had white rhino. It's not really a suitable habitat. And so yeah, we're not going to bring back a species that was never historically there, even though they are of pretty important conservation concern. Hope
And
that
the
answers.
next one, sorry, apology. Yes, and the next question was from Chai Fatisil. I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrong. Do all your rangers report sightly of wildlife with pictures, or do you have specific teams in the field for this?
No, so we actually, all the rangers report the wildlife. They're all, it's actually one thing, it's really interesting that you asked that question, and I think I'll take a step back and explain a bit more. But what we found is that rangers as a whole, the emphasis was very much on the law enforcement side of things. And when you look at conservation, you need people that are passionate, you need people that really care. And I can't emphasize that enough. So what we did is we decided to retrain things and basically have our rangers be much more aligned to the conservation objectives of the park and be in touch with conservation. So all the rangers are very well trained. They're all really good at identifying animals. A lot of them know these individuals a lot better than I do. And so, yeah, they all report them. They don't all take photos of them. That's something that we're actually working on next year. And we're going to do this really cool thing next year where we're putting a camera at each of our ranger camps. So we've got 4 camps outside of where I'm based here. And they've got Starlink. So each ranger camp has Starlink access so that everyone's got internet. And what we're going to do is they're going to take a camera out with them in the field. When they see priority species, they're going to take a photo. They're going to come back. They're going to plug the SD card into a phone. And then they're going to send us the photos on OneDrive and or like a SharePoint. And then we can ID these animals. So they're going to help us with our monitoring input. And it's 100%, that's the right way to do it. It's to tie your teams in and just have as much collaboration and input as possible.
And the next question is about which of the tech tools can you use to prevent human-wildlife conflict, and also which tools could be used to resolve potential conflict once prevention failed? Are there some?
I think that's such a difficult and complex question to answer, and I don't think I am fully equipped to answer it. Human-wildlife conflict is not something I specialize in at all. What I can tell you is that we avoid human-wildlife conflict by having a really good fence line and having 30 people that constantly monitor the fence every single day. They literally stay at a camp, like we've got 1, 2, 8 fencing camps, and they literally stay at a camp. They walk about 8 Ks a day, and these guys check the fence religiously. We make sure that the voltage drops don't happen, so that you don't have, an excuse for elephants to test the fence. When an elephant starts testing fence and they start pushing them over, you can often face a lot of difficulty. Also, obviously, engagement and sensitization to these sorts of issues is very important. It depends on your political climate, the country that you work in, if there's compensation schemes, that sort of things. When prevention fails, that's when you have to have, it depends on the context, right? If you have a species that you can call up, so wild dog and lion, specifically in the context of Majeti, would be human-wildlife conflict risks if we didn't manage them the way we do. We have kind of realized that the risk of a human-wildlife conflict situation is literally, life or death for a park like Majeti. So what we do, we have a very habituated wild dog and lion population. We can call most of our wild dogs up, or most of our lions up, and all of our wild dogs up with the sound that we play and feed them. People might say this is interfering with wildlife, but when it comes to that animal breaking out and you being able to save its life, no one is going to double question something like that, right? So that's where this sort of thing becomes so important, and where, taking a step back and understanding conservation as a whole has changed. It's so important. So yeah, prevention, good fence line, early warning, having collars on, targeted individuals, as many lines as possible. Honestly, there's certain guidelines that people talk about. We obviously try not to collar every lion just because it's not ethical, but is it ethical to allow human-wildlife conflict? No. So we have a balance that we try and follow. Geofences do help. And then, having a secure fence line is the most important. And then also having animals that aren't stressed. So if you have no poaching in the park, your animals are not under stressful conditions. They're not, aggressive, or, you don't have this sort of intensity in your reserve. Our lions are very relaxed around human presence. Our elephants are very relaxed around human presence. A park settles when it's well managed. Parks that have very stressed out animals become very aggressive. You got different situations.
Mm. Thank you. And that is a wonderful message from it was from Nicole Avant, who said this is an excellent presentation, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes. And then let's move to another question. If Anthony is still online in the room with us, you can please unmute your microphone and ask your question.
Okay, I was just asking if that you guys use when maybe darting the animal have any side effect after their location, and also let me check how other diseases that affect the wild dogs apart from rabies.
So I missed your first question there. So you're asking, after darting, does it affect the animal's location? Is that what you're asking? Like when we dart them, does that affect the way they move? Okay, I'm just going to answer.
Yes. If they have, because they are drugs.
Yeah.
And do they have any diseases that can make the animal like sick or any side effect?
No, I'm not a vet. So yeah, I'm not that good at answering these sorts of questions. Because yeah, it's not my background. What I do know is that the drugs we use have been tested a lot. They have very big margins of safety. Obviously, a lot of them are very dangerous. Your potent opioids are obviously extremely potent, and like the inside of a needle can kill a couple hundred people if you're using like etorphine or Thionil. So these drugs are obviously, you have to be very careful when you manage them. There are side effects, 100%. Long term, I'm not experienced enough to tell you. What I can tell you, the effects wear off pretty quickly, especially on your opioids. You administer a reversal and your animal wakes up, and they are black rhino most of the time want to come and damage the helicopter or come and chase you up a tree. So they seem all right. It's obviously not ideal that we have to interfere with them. But we live in a world now where you got two choices. You either allow these animals to go extinct, or you try and help them. So yeah, if you had to give me the option, I'd always try and help them. And then your second question about the wild dog diseases, yeah, obviously you can try and treat as much as possible. When they came in, we treated for canine distemper, but after consulting with our vet, there was mixed opinion on whether giving the rest of the pack canine distemper vaccines was worth it. You have to balance it between how many times do you want to intervene. You will have impact on those animals when you intervene. So generally, we try and do collarings at one time. So if you've got a wild dogs to collar, you don't collar like one. You try and collar 3 dogs in one sitting, and then it's done. You've got 3 collars on. Just it limits the amount that you disturb them for. So yeah, we try and do that.
Yeah, Ned, let's allow the next question from Tyra. Please, you can unmute your microphone and ask your question.
I wanted to ask you what frequency, how often do your collars send GPS points? And for lions specifically, how long does the lion need to stay in the same spot before you decide that that's a cluster worth checking?
Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. So lion collars we update every 2 hours. The limitation with LoRa is that you can't ask for specific hours that you want to update. So you can't say, I want an update every day at 12 o'clock. It's just a limitation that we have right now. I think it'll change in future. I think you will be able to set the time. So yeah, it's every 2 hours. It's just continuous update. It depends per species. Our elephant darter, we've got them set at an hour. We used to have them set at half an hour when we wanted that. It all depends on the lifespan that you want from the collar, how often you set your intervals. But yeah, we aim for 2.5 years, 3 years with our lion collars. For the clusters, we used to just do 5 points in an area. But we actually found that, like you say, having a time frame rather than number of points was better, because sometimes it would miss a point in an area. Generally 15 hours we go for in all locations. However, it's very contextual. If we find that the lion's lying in a riverbed and that the time that it rested was during day hours, and it was there for an unconventionally long amount of time, we often assume that it was then just sleeping in an area, and we actually skip on that carcass cluster. Specifically riverbeds, we just find, sure, maybe they make a lot of kills in riverbeds, but we also find often it's just resting in the shade or the nice cool sand of a riverbed. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. I don't know if we still have Salim. I know he kept raising your hand. If you're still in the room, please unmute your microphone and ask your question.
Okay. Yeah, I dropped my question like in the comments during the presentation. It was all about the white and black rhinos. Craig said that they're having white rhinos only, right?
Mm.
White, black. Which one are you having in Majete only? So I'm asking if like the other species of rhinos are not there. Is there any specific reason behind of not being there, or have you tried its introduction and failed to adapt? How is it? So,
no. So yeah, I think I addressed this, but basically they never used to occur there. So we can't reintroduce an animal that never occurred in the area. Ethically, we'd probably be challenged on many fronts. Even if it's like, maybe I wouldn't have a problem with it. It's just, you can't really bring an animal that never belonged here back. So yeah, that's why we haven't done it. They also probably would struggle. Our landscape is pretty dominated by like thick vegetation. It's a lot of miombo, which is obviously dominated by Brachystegia sort of species. And then our grassland component is very competitive. We've got a lot of buffalo and that sort of thing. So yeah.
I see three questions, interesting questions from Correct. My strategies are recommended for correcting reliable data in remote or hard to reach conservation areas.
So yeah, what do you mean by that? Like, I don't quite understand it. Sorry, would you
I
mind
think he was trying to refer remote areas where there is no internet or connectivity. How are other ways of correcting reliable data
Well, it's just going
in
back to
remote areas? Yes.
Yeah, it would just be about going back to old methods, writing it down with like filling in forms, writing it down and then transcribing it. I suppose these days you could probably just use a tablet, and then just have a tablet that you've got a form that you fill in and you. So like Survey 123 is actually probably your best bet in that situation, or in my experience it is, because you can fill in Survey 123 forms offline and then bring back the information and then sync it onto a server at a later stage. That's probably your best way to do it. Or that's how we do it in our areas, the remote areas. We basically just fill in a form. It's got a couple of like drop-down lists. You answer your questions and then you can sync it when you get back and you can look at your data spatially. So I would suggest looking at Survey 123.
And we have a good message. It's an appreciation message from Dr. Rubana, saying many thanks for excellent presentation on digital system navigation in conservation. It was very informative and inspiring to see how digital innovation are transforming conservation practices. The insight you shared will be extremely useful as we explore similar application for wildlife monitoring and data integration in Sudan. Thank you so much, Rubana from Wildlife Research Center in Sudan. We appreciate. And I want to ask Peterson Kiyuki, could you please unmute your microphone and ask your question?
I see he asked here, why do rhinos in our reserve face severe ear collapse? I can just answer that.
Okay.
Well, we don't actually know, and we haven't really extensively researched it. If you want to come and research it, you're more than welcome. But basically what we find is that in our wet season, so generally from like December up to April, we find that the ear degradation severely increases alongside our tick loads. So the ticks on the rhinos become severe. Now, that's where your question comes in. Basically, are your tick loads increasing as a result of rhinos being very like immunocompromised? And so basically you got like a stressor in the population that's causing that. Or is it just natural that your rhinos would pick up more ticks? We also find that the tick loads on the ears specifically becomes very heavy. We then were able to tie that back to the fact we don't have oxpeckers in Majete. So the use of like acaricides, like extremely poisonous pesticides on cattle, there's a lot of cattle farming around the park. There's basically a real prevalence, or a real correlation between the use of that and the fact that we don't have oxpeckers. So we suspect the oxpeckers got poisoned. And yeah, they basically aren't really subsisting in large numbers in Majeti. We barely have any. I've seen like 1 or 2 yellow-billed, but generally we don't get them. So I think it's related to the fact that you've got no oxpeckers, high amounts of ticks, and then rhinos that are potentially immunocompromised, but I have no proof of that. It's just, why else would they have so many ticks? The other animals don't seem to suffer the same way the rhinos do with ticks. Buffalo don't seem to have that many. So it seems like a very specific, maybe it's a specific species of tick that really impacts them. Obviously, we've spoken anecdotally to a couple of like really good wildlife vets and that sort of thing. They pointed to similar situations in Zambia where they had like ear problems on their rhinos. And that was because of spear grass, and the spear grass was basically digging into the ear, but it was also ticks that had first bitten them and then exposed the ear, and then the spear grass got in. What do we plan to do in future about it? Well, fortunately, hasn't like resulted in any deaths of rhinos. And so as a result of that, it's not that we put it as a lower priority thing, but it's definitely not something that we're like, oh, we have to sort this out now. We had an explosion in our lion population, for example. And when you've got limited resources and you have to devote your time to certain things, you obviously choose what your priorities are. So we'll probably focus on that at another time now. If we had all the resources in the world, we'd do everything at once, but we don't. So yeah, we'll have a look at that, and we'll see what the cause is, and hopefully we can rectify it. Something like oxpeckers being absent from your system is a big job. It's not an easy fix. We are working to engage with communities outside the park. I think using more eco-friendly oxpecker dip is like important regardless of if it's impacting rhinos or not. It's just not sustainable to be using pesticides that are extremely, extremely toxic to the environment. You can imagine what other impacts it's having, in the water levels or in the water tables, that sort of thing. So yeah, unfortunately, when poverty is a reality that it's 80% of your population faces, and the cheapest dip becomes available, you're always going to choose the cheaper option. So it's about helping to subsidize those things potentially. It's about looking at innovative ways. I actually thought what a cool project would be is to make like a pesticide out of neem, which is that tree species that we've got a lot of here, and then you could use like a natural pesticide. Unfortunately, I found out that it's really inefficient at controlling like tick loads and stuff on cattle. So that's why people don't use it. So the other thing with the harmful pesticides is they really work, but yeah, obviously detrimental and have a lot of secondary poisoning effects. It's a long answer for a short question, but I hope you understand.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Believe that was very clear mentioned. Now we have a last question from Jealousy Mashawi. Can you explain how remote sensing imagery is utilized for spatial analysis considering hotspot of species?
Okay, so yeah, well, I think it just depends on the question that you want to ask. And that's the most important thing, right? There's no broad answer for any of this. How you would use, remote sensing imagery for elephants versus how you would use it for, lion is very different. I'm not an expert at this at all, so I can't talk to, how I would use it. We've used it at a very basic level in Majeti to determine sensitive ecological zones that we don't want to tamper with, areas of erosion concern where we didn't want, boreholes and that sort of thing to be put in for artificial water. So we've used it at a very basic management level, and that's what I am. Like I am not a researcher. I don't dig deep into these things. I look at things that are going to be practical on a day-to-day that are going to shape the park, and that's the sort of thing we try and implement. So I'm sure there's people that can speak a lot better on how you could do that sort of thing. And asking ChatGPT would probably give you a better answer than I can. So yeah.
Okay. AI coming back to as our solution, as advice and assistant in our daily work. So yes, I think it's not a bad idea to refer to it. Thank you.
Cool.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yes, so Kruger, I was going to ask if you have a last recap for us. Last one to the students, for WG students who are about to move into the workspace, but even the rest of the audience on the screen here. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say it's all about passion. More than anything else, it's just about passion. Tech can go out the window. If you are passionate, you can make anything work. That's all, like, honestly.
Mhm.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Craig, for making your time. I know it was not easy, but we want to appreciate your time and your experience and expertise you just gave us is really rich of knowledge. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.